Good morning. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee for Thursday, February 7th. My name is Jeremy Schrader, and I'm the chair of the committee. With me at the dais are Councilmember Ellison, Councilmember Reich, and Councilmember Goodman. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We've got 6 items on the agenda today, and we'll start with the consent agenda, which is items 3 through 4. Item 3 is the approving of a reappointment of Marilyn Sunderberg in the Heritage Preservation Commission, and item 4 is a street vacation application submitted by Graco and the Minneapolis Park Board for a portion of 10th Avenue Northeast between Sibley Street Northeast and the Mississippi River. Are there any questions or comments from the committee members on these items, or would anyone like to pull any of these items off for discussion? Not seeing anything, I will now move 3 and 4 for approval. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. We'll then move on to the quasi-judicial hearing portion of our agenda. Item number 1 is the consideration of an appeal submitted by David Goya regarding the decision of the Heritage Preservation Commission to deny the demolition of a historic resource application. And we'll begin with a staff presentation. Councilmember Goodman.
Mr. Chair, I just want to note that I am scheduled to be in a settlement conference today starting at 10:15, but I'm going to stay for the first item because it's a critical item in my ward, but then I'll need to leave, so hopefully we will achieve quorum so I can cover the council on a settlement conference.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Good morning, council members. I wanted to give a brief background on the demolition historic resource application, since this is an application that you often haven't seen with this body. So I'll keep this brief, but Minneapolis has 175 local landmarks and 18 historic districts. Local historic landmarks and 18 historic districts. And those are designated for one of 7 different criteria, either the social significance, association with a significant person, architecture or landscape design, being with a master architect, builder, craftsman, or archaeological significance. Historic designation can happen proactively or reactively, and that reactive aspect or process or examples are ones that often happen through this demolition of historic resource application, or a process of, or a potential threat to demolition. Each wrecking permit that comes to the city of Minneapolis is reviewed for historic significance, and each year about 100 to 200 are reviewed by our department. And it's only a handful, 3 to 5, that escalate to the level of being a demolition of a historic resource and requires review by the HPC. So even applications reviewed by the HPC, this type of application reviewed by the HPC is not common. And then to get to you is even less common. So the HPC reviews the demolition of historic resource application when that wrecking permit is not approved administratively. And the findings to allow for demolition, that meaning what would require the HPC to state that it could be allowed for the property to be allowed for demolition. The HPC may not agree with staff's initial thoughts that the property rises to the level of being a historic landmark or a historic district, or that it is necessary to correct an unsafe or dangerous condition, or that there are no reasonable alternatives. If the HPC finds that one of those criteria are not met, then it is likely that a designation study is commenced. So a demolition historic resource, if it is denied, does not automatically become a landmark. It goes back to the to staff to write a report to outlay how the property is or is not, which criteria are the most important and relevant for that property. We bring that report back to the HPC, and they recommend to the council if the property should be a historic landmark. So again, your question when reviewing this application is not, is this a historic landmark, but do you want to give staff more time to study this for historic significance, write that full report, and bring it back to you for that question of being a landmark at a later date. I'm having troubles with my information, but the property in question is the Oakland Apartments at 215 9th Street South. The map here, the aerial, you can see right now there is not much left on that block face and in the block, but the Oakland Apartments is here, and it's next to another building that is a historic resource on the 9th Street block between 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue. The Oakland Apartment building is a 3.5-story brownstone walk-up, and it has, the last use was having rights to 21 to 22 units. In 2016, there was a severe fire that took place at the building, and the building has sat vacant since. The property owner, shortly after that fire, did apply for a wrecking permit, and that wrecking permit, that administrative wrecking permit, was denied, and it went to the level of requiring a demolition historic resource application to allow for the demolition. Since that time, I do want to credit the property owner for not rushing to submitting that demolition historic resource application and allowing potential other owners and people interested in the property to purchase the property and rehab it. And so I do want to commend him for doing that. There has been little work to protect the building, including a roof. I know the applicant is quick to say that they didn't want to spend the additional tens of thousands of dollars to put that roof on if they knew that this building was going to be coming down, but it has continued to sit vacant. Now, staff recommended and the HPC upheld the decision to deny the designation study and commence that designation study for the following reasons. We felt that the property does rise to the level of being a historic resource. It could be the first apartment building of this style and this design built in Minneapolis. It's a quality example of the Richardsonian Romanesque architectural style and designed by a master architect of record, Harry Wild Jones. It's been on the radar for local designation for decades, and there's a number of reasons. I can answer those questions if you have questions about that, but we've been aware of this property being an important historic resource for a long time, and there's other properties throughout the city that are known to be important resources that haven't been officially designated. This is one of them. So going back to those findings of what else could allow the HPC or you to allow the demolition. Is this in an unsafe or dangerous condition? Staff stated that no, it is not in an unsafe or dangerous condition. And that being communication with our building code official. And it is true, Problem Properties Unit within the city did write a letter stating that they wanted the building raised or removed, but within that application that the applicant did receive, there is an appeal process to that. So it's not automatically Problem Properties Unit stating that the building has to be demolished or that the CPID and Problem Properties are at complete odds over this. Both parties, or everyone within the city, just wants something to happen to this building and something for the building owner to move, hopefully to start efforts to rehab it. Are there reasonable alternatives? And once again, staff believes the answer is yes. In dealing with these properties over the years, I've never seen so much interest of individual parties coming forward to express interest in rehabbing a building. And there has been a difference in prices of what the applicant wants and what a potential owner is willing to purchase it for. But I believe that that divide is getting less, and that we continue to appreciate the applicant willing to entertain these offers for people that want to buy the property. So economic value, the applicant has been upfront of what they received from an insurance settlement, about approximately $600,000, and that there's still approximately $600,000 left in land value, and that's approximately what their asking price is. Public comments, in the agenda packet, there are a few letters stating that there are people that are interested in buying the property, and also the neighborhood did support the request for demolition, and it relied on the applicant's partial story of Problem Properties Unit stating that they wanted this property demolished. So in summary, I just want to state again, we're not looking for you to make answer the question, is this a landmark today? We're asking, where staff recommended and HPC upheld the decision of, we were looking to deny the demolition permit to commence the designation study. And I'm happy to answer questions you may have.
Well, thank you. First, just want to have the record reflect that we've been joined by Council President Bender and Councilmember Gordon. Are there any questions for staff? All right, thank you. At this point, we'll open the hearing, and I'll first give the applicant the opportunity to speak to the committee. Is the applicant here? If you could state your name and address for the record.
Dave Gagne, 632 City View Drive, Minnetonka. I'm one of the partners. Our family owns half the property, and the Meijer family owns half the property. Both our fathers purchased it back in the 60s, and both have since passed away, so it turned into having 10 owners. One of them passed away, and now there's 9 owners in the property. So, along with the issues of dealing with trying to sell the property as is or vacant land, we have no interest in doing anything with it. We kind of either want to get it sold as a vacant lot, or to somebody that'll rehab the building. The building department issued us a letter, I don't know if you were clear on that, to tear the building down. And as, part of the process, a lot of these guys looking at the building, because it's not, that high a price building, there's some smaller people looking at it. None of those, they need to get historic tax credits, affordable housing credits, et cetera. They need, a contingency period of 12 months or so. The building department, we just had a meeting with them 3 weeks ago. They will not, we can't go sell the building to somebody contingent where they might close in a year in the building department with the letter we have, and we just met with them with Aaron 2 weeks ago. They could come in 30 days and say, this is going to be a bigger problem, we're tearing the building down. Now we got a purchase agreement with somebody and we're going to get sued because they were supposed to buy this building that's no longer there. So that, the only real way for us to sell the building is somebody will buy it non-contingent as is, start the rehab process. Even if somebody does that after meeting with the building officials, they got to show pretty rapid progress of getting it fixed up and getting a roof on, in order for them to get rid of their order. Now, that's maybe something the council can do. The other issue with the roof, and I think as part of their condition at the preservation, they want us to preserve the building for a year, and they could extend it for 6 months, which is 18 months. And I would assume none of you have been in the building, but it's, the hole in the roof that you can see from the aerial is probably a third of the roof. When that fire started, there's a 4-foot attic in that roof, and the fire department couldn't get it out and backed off for a couple hours or hour and a half and let it burn, and the whole entire roof structure, even under what still looks like there's a roof there, is all charred and real not in good shape. So putting the roof on is not anywhere near a $10,000 deal. There's a flat roof, with it holds snow and water, and the whole roof structure, even to be a temporary roof, and we're in the building business and stuff, is probably at least 50 grand. To redo the roof right and put a new roof on is probably 100 grand. So if somebody was to rehab it, they're not going to spend 50 grand to temp up a roof and put a new flat rubber roof on and then tear all that off and spend another 100 grand. So if it was as simple as 5-10 grand to dry this building in, that wouldn't have been an issue for us even probably, but it's a lot bigger project than that. It isn't a little hole in a 612 roof on your house so you can put a tarp over and some temporary plywood. This is a lot, bigger structural problem. And that the building is not in a condition that it probably should sit that way for another year. I don't think we want it to sit that way. There's bricks falling off into the parking lot next door. There's, issues if you drive around and look at it. So I don't think if the decision is for us to wait another 12 to 18 months, it's something we can live with, because I think there's too many hazards out there. And we're not looking to do anything with the property. We'd rather sell it to somebody that would want the land or the building as is. We've offered the building for sale for 20% plus less than the assessed value of the land itself. It isn't like we're trying to rip somebody off on it or anything. And at some point the land, could be worth double what it's appraised at if they want to build a big building there someday. So we're not holding out for anything like that. We're trying to move on, and we got a lot of individuals involved in it. they're not, it's not something I'm going to be able to get people on board to give away for 50 or 100 grand, because some of the neighbors would buy the land for maybe not this full assessed land value, but probably 80, 90% of that. So we'd like to get some resolution and move it along, and we'd still continue to try and get somebody to buy it to rehab it, would probably be our first choice, because it'd be the quickest, cleanest, easiest deal, but, we want to know there's an alternative to do something else. And the part about it being historic and stuff, it's a neat old building, and I understand all that, but even if you had a designated historic building that burned that substantially, there's, issues with it, and sometimes probably can't be rehabbed, But I'm here, my brother's here, and if you guys have any questions for us, we're sure open to talk. Or
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll now open the hearing to the public, and please keep your comments limited to 2 minutes, which will be tracked at the timer next to the clerk. Would any member of the public be interested in speaking? If you could state your name and address for the record.
Sounds good. Hello, my name's Eric Brown. I live at 210 North 2nd Street. Dave Gagne was nice enough to show me the building a while back, 2 weeks ago, and we looked at it, so I'm also familiar with the internal structure. I came here today just to express the desire to see that the city uphold its rules and its desires in these historic buildings. This is an important property to the history of Minneapolis, and I don't want to see the lack of maintenance or the historic, I would say, neglect of a building reflect on the way its present value is judged and the way that it's seen to be financially viable. I think that it would be wrong to circumvent the law and the rules in that way, and that with a little bit more time and with a little bit more effort from the community, I think we can find a way to make this building a place that is providing housing to the people of Minneapolis and also remaining a historically important structure. I think that because of the fact that the building is as important as it is, it's worth taking that extra time. And while the building is valued by the city at $650,000, I think that we all know that sometimes the city doesn't necessarily get those numbers exactly right. And I think that number is probably a little high, which is why the current owner and people that are making offers aren't quite finding a meeting ground yet. But with a little bit more time, I think that we will be able to figure that out. So I'm asking that there is not a demolition that takes place and that we move this forward with continued study from the HPC. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else interested in speaking? Anyone else? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to now close the public hearing. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm obviously going to move to deny the appeal and prohibit the demolition of the building. I do appreciate the property owner's good faith effort to work with people who have come to you, but the reality is that there are reasonable alternatives. And this is clearly a historic resource based on a whole number of issues, including its Richardsonian Romanesque style. I lived in a Richardsonian Romanesque style building for some 21 years, and I can point out that there are very few of them left downtown. Henry Weil Jones is also a very significant architect from the period in our city's history, and I believe that should the preservation team look to designate this as a landmark, it would achieve that landmark status, thus allowing it to be eligible for historic tax credits. So there is clearly a reasonable alternative. I will note that we've been fielding calls in our office for the better part of 6 months, and certainly after the article appeared in the Star Tribune, from people who wanted to step forward. I will note that while the city says the land is worth $660,000, if you have to take into account the demolition of the building, it's worth far less than that, because it's going to cost something to demolish the building. And it only really probably is worth that if it's adjoined with all of the other surface parking on that block, and I've been on the city council 20 years, and that block has been surface parking the entire time. So clearly there isn't a motivated owner to build something on that large surface parking lot, and that to add to it, I think would be unbelievably wrong as it pertains to the city's goals and objectives in terms of building affordable housing and preventing the use of surface parking. So I have seen buildings in worse shape than this. I will note that the Milwaukee Road Depot was in a lot worse shape than this. I will note that almost every building on the riverfront now, including the North Star Blanket Building and the Mill City Museum, were all relics. And with loving and attention and historic tax credits, those buildings were rehabbed. I'm reluctant, but will point out a constituent in the room who's sitting in the back who took a building at 300 Clifton, which was essentially in about some of the worst shape I've ever seen, and turned it into one of the city's most beautiful Airbnb and party spaces in the city, and it's in a tremendous asset on Clifton Avenue. So people do it all the time, and this building is eligible for designation. There are reasonable alternatives, and I'm hoping that once we've now clarified that we're not going to allow the demolition, the family will work with any of the people who have come forward, and lots of them have. Perhaps a non-contingent offer would be seen most favorably, and those who want to buy the building probably need to think about that. I will note the city does not have resources to put into this building, so anyone thinking the city is going to pay you to do it, that's not going to happen. But at the right price, I think someone can do something really great with this building and hopefully turn it back into some level of housing. So I usually when owners are in front of us, their attitude is not what this owner's is. This owner's attitude has been pretty circumspect about the entire thing. They've been pretty good to deal with and not bombastic or bratty, and we appreciate that. And hopefully your calm demeanor combined with those who want to do something with the building will come to a very successful resolution with regard to getting the building rehabbed. And hopefully 2 years from now, we'll be sitting here knowing we did the right thing.
Thank you. Council President Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It sounds like this particular property owner has a little bit of experience with things related to land construction, but I do think sometimes, which may be true in this case, our CPED department is divided up into different divisions where we have the, building division and the building inspectors, and then we have the affordable housing team, which is separate, and we have the current planners, which are separate. And so I think in this kind of complex situation, it might be helpful kind of looking at staff, if we can maybe try to help get a team together of the folks from those different parts of the department to help support all of the different things that would go into the next steps of this project. I think that might be helpful in helping the property owner navigate the various elements that were highlighted during the public testimony.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Councilmember Goodman's motion is before us. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Item number 2 is the consideration of an appeal submitted by William Wells regarding the condition of approval for variance and site plan review for an application at 901 Winter Street Northeast, and we'll begin with the staff presentation.
Is this yours? Here, this is yours. Yeah, thank you. Good morning. My name is Mei-Ling Smith. I will be presenting the appeal for 901 Winter Street Northeast. And this is a project that went to Planning Commission on January 14th. Staff recommended denial of all of their requested applications, but the Planning Commission overturned the staff recommendation. And now the applicant is appealing 2 specific conditions of approval. So I'll just briefly go through what the project is and then what those conditions of approval that are requesting being appealed. So here's a zoning map showing the location. It is a site that's located at a corner lot fronting Winter Street Northeast and Fillmore Street Northeast in Northeast Minneapolis. Hennepin Avenue is about a block and a half to the south of the site. Here's more context. So the existing site contains a one-story industrial building that was most recently used as a metal finishing plant. And here's a larger aerial. There is one curb cut proposed off of Winter Street Northeast, and there would be a surface parking area and a 20-unit apartment building. Here's some renderings showing the view from the corners. So just to really provide a brief overview of the City Planning Commission actions, the rezoning was approved, notwithstanding staff recommendation. So they're recommending approval of going from the R2B district to the R4 district. They approved the variance to allow the minimum front yard to be reduced to allow ground floor patios. They recommended approval of the variance to reduce the minimum lot area. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about this in a second, but basically the R4 district does have a minimum lot area requirement, and the applicant is requesting a total of 20 units. Normally 16 would be allowed by right. Because they're requesting to also qualify for the density bonus, they're allowed up to 19 units by right. The variance is to go from 19 to 20 dwelling units. And then the site plan review is requested for the new 3-story multiple family building. And there are just a few recommended conditions of approval regarding the exterior elevations, some servicing materials, and landscaping. So the applicant would like to discuss 2 of the conditions of approval, one that is related to the density bonus that is required for the minimum lot area variance. And so that is that they would like to limit the amount of time that is being required for affordability to 10 years, and that we should specify that the units could be sold. They could be condos or rentals. And the second condition of approval is that they would like to strike the requirement that they comply with minimum durability requirements in site plan review. But they're amenable to the condition that they would eliminate the blank walls. So to discuss the deed restriction condition of approval, as I mentioned, they're allowed a total of 16 dwelling units by right. They can achieve 19 dwelling units if they achieve a density bonus. In the zoning code, in the 2019 zoning code, we don't specifically clarify what affordable housing means. It refers back to the unified housing policy now. And so I thought that this would be an opportunity to actually clarify what we did intend based on the 2018 definition that this condition of approval was applicable to. So the bonus for affordable housing is achieved if you achieve 20% of your dwelling units, if 20% of the units meet the definition of affordable housing. And so they are proposing to do that because 4 of their 20 units would be affordable. And so here's the 2018 definition of affordable housing. There is a typo that I was trying to remedy, but I wasn't able to successfully do that before the hearing. So the AMI, the area median income under the old definition of affordable housing, was 50% of the area median income. The duration requirement is 15 years. And so if you qualify for the density bonus under the 2018 code when this application was indeed complete, the requirement would be 20% of the units meet the 50% AMI for a total of 15 years. And that's what the intention was for the condition of approval. I'd like to note that I know that the applicant is applying for some incentives through our housing department, and we don't ever look at those requirements to inform how we define affordable housing in the zoning code. Those are separate issues. So anything that we apply in the zoning code, they might have to go above and beyond just to meet their requirements of their specific housing programs or vice versa. And I would like to make an amendment to the staff recommendation and actually an edit to this language, because I did not specify in this language that the AMI should be 50%. So if council does choose to adopt this recommendation, I'd like the opportunity to try to finesse that a little bit. But anyway, we are proposing to amend the original condition of approval that was suggested to the City Planning Commission and require that at least 20% or 4 of the units would remain at 50% AMI for no less than 15 years. And then to move on to the exterior materials condition of approval, we recommended not approving the alternative compliance, and the City Planning Commission was in agreement with that, but the applicant would like to strike that part of the condition. We are considering the engineered wood panel and the engineered wood siding to be substantially similar to a fiber cement based product. So if we split those out, they would need alternative compliance for the engineered wood siding on all 4 of the elevations. So they are exceeding the 30% maximum that we use in the site plan review. We found that the proposed alternatives that they're suggesting would not sufficiently offset the appearance and the durability of the proposed exterior materials. I have a material sample board here too, if anybody would like to look at it, along with some spec sheets. And here are how the elevations appear. So you see that there is the engineered wood siding panel in that light gray area, in the lighter beige color, and then the siding material is the brown color. There's a stone base for the building, and they would be amenable to remedying the blank wall on the north side of the building at the bottom that you see.
Ms. Smith, just a second. Council President Bender.
Yes.
Ms. Smith, could you go back to the last slide and
This one?
what is looking at that blank wall on the bottom image?
It's a residential use.
So it's like an alley. It's behind the alley.
There's not an alley. It's just I can go back to the first slide.
Oh, it's the north side, so it's the adjacent.
Yep, there's a residential property right there.
Thank
So
you.
there are no alleys adjacent to the site. And so I have I have the hard copy of the material sample board if you are interested, but all of the products on the top are engineered wood siding based products. And we're just recommending that the original Planning Commission condition of approval be set. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Not seeing any questions. At this point, I'll open the public hearing, and I'll first give the applicant the opportunity to speak to the committee. Would the applicant like a chance to speak? If you can state your name and address for the record.
Good morning, council members. My name is William Wells. I'm the architect and also the applicant. I wanted to thank the council members and the Planning Commission for supporting this project unanimously at the public hearing on January 14th. My appeal, is not any amount of disrespect. We're asking for some clarification and more communication on 2 of these items that were conditions of approval. The property owner and I were very concerned about a permanent deed restriction. We thought that was unreasonable, but now zoning staff has changed their position and they're asking for a 15-year deed restriction. We are asking for a 10-year, but I guess there's not really that much difference between 10 or 15. So I'm not going to spend that much time on item 1 appeal because staff's changed their position. So there's no sense to really talk about item 1 anymore. Item 2 is our request for alternative compliance. It's not about reducing the durability of the siding. We asked for alternative compliance on the project to go with a different type of siding. The purpose of that request is to save the applicants some money such that they can reallocate funds and reinvest in other parts of the project. That's the purpose of why we're doing alternative compliance. We want to spend the funds on doubling the amount of landscaping, building a fence around the property, a trellis. We want to bury the power lines that are on the site. So it's just about taking the money and spending it in other parts of the site because the budget is very, very limited with 20 units. So if we could just look at the elevation. So first of all, could we just, so that's the existing conditions of the building right now, and you can see the power lines. just have a really negative impact on the aesthetics of this neighborhood. And the neighborhood group got together and wrote you a letter that supports my appeal and says that the highest priority is burying these power lines. So we are trying to work with the neighborhood group and the city to spend money in that direction, and that's a very expensive thing to do because the power lines run on two sides of the property. They run here, but then they also run behind the property. So burying it is probably going to cost us about $100,000. That's very significant. This is an elevation I drew of the proposed building. This right here is a stucco panel that we want to use. That is this material right here. This is the stucco panel that we want to use. I can pass this around. This is the LP smart siding that we want to use here. That's the brown material here that we want to use here. This requires alternative compliance. It's a wood composite material. If we go exactly with what staff is requesting, we'd have to use this material. This is a fiber cement panel. It's thicker. Fiber cement panel, it's double the cost. But this is not more durable than this. And that's zoning staff's position, that you should deny my request for alternative compliance because this is more durable than that. That's actually not true. I have an expert witness here that would like to testify that's done some testing that would like to speak today to this issue of zoning staff's position that my request is for something that's less durable, because that's not true. I also wanted to just talk briefly about that elevation. Councilmember Bender is to the north of the facade, and it is facing a neighbor's driveway and house. That neighbor came to a lot of the neighborhood meetings. They did not want a lot of windows and balconies facing their backyard and their house. They told me, keep the facade simple. Do not put balconies and windows facing my house. I go, okay. So that's what we have, and that's why I did that. So I'd like to ask my...
Oh, just one second. We've got a question from the council president.
Is there any vegetation there in between the north side and the next?
Council President, so this is the neighbor's house right here. This is their backyard. This is that facade. There's a fence right there. That's a 6-foot fence that goes continuously across the property line. But there isn't a lot of, there's not a lot of room to do a lot of landscaping. So we'd request that my witness speak to this durability.
Sure, that'd be great.
Hi, I've got some information I brought with me. If you want to take a look at it, I can share it with you.
Great.
So my name's Lance Olson. I'm with Louisiana Pacific. I'm the technical director for field sales for LP. Been with LP for 30 years, and I've been in the siding part of LP for 30 years, working on the quality and technology side of the business. So I've been intimately involved in the engineering and design and testing and validation of the product. So I think I understand probably where the question or concern is coming from. When you look at our products, they're wood composite products. I think when people hear about wood composites, they think about past products like Masonite or Interseal, products that haven't been very durable and haven't performed as well as they should have performed in the marketplace. So I'll first say this is definitely not Masonite, it's definitely not Interseal, it's definitely not wood composites of the past. So part of that packet, there's a durability piece in there. So that durability piece, you can see it's been touched by the hands of marketing. But I can tell you, as the person responsible on the technical side, working with our legal department, everything that we claim in that durability piece is substantiated by data, years of testing, performance testing, accelerated testing, worst case testing, in some places like Hilo, Hawaii, very wet environments. If you think about wood products and what they're vulnerable to, it's water, it's weather, it's water, it's rain, it's humidity. So we tested under the worst conditions and evaluated, some of it we've been evaluating over 20 years, looking at how it's performing. Now, what makes this product durable is the controls around our manufacturing process and the binders and the materials that we put into it to tie it all together as a composite. And in addition to that, we work with the Building Science Corporation and other third parties to make sure that the product is applied in a way that is a functional part of the building envelope, so that it's managing moisture the way that it should. But on top of that, that's not real world. That's not the way that the product always gets installed. So the product needs to be durable enough, robust enough to be able to perform under situations where it's not installed perfectly right all the time, because that's just not the industry. So it's treated with a wood preservative, consistent with the American Wood Preservers Association standard T1 section J for non-pressure wood composites. So it's treated with zinc borate, which is a safe wood preservative. I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with borax, and it's used in all paints as a preservative. So it's a safe, commonly used preservative. So we use that product as a wood preservative for our product. So it's treated homogeneously throughout the thickness of the product. It's sparingly soluble, and this gets into the science side of why we have a 50-year warranty on our product. So what we can do is we can measure over time, and we can look at the boron depletion of our product, and we know that as long as that boron level stays above 0.3% by weight, that product is going to continue to resist fungal decay or resist fungus from being able to feed on the wood cellulose. So we're basically, in situations where the product isn't installed the way that it should be installed, if it is getting wetter than we want it to get, it's still not going to rot. So we're canceling out that failure mode that's common to other past wood composites or solid wood. So we can look at that data over time, and that's what the basis of that 50-year warranty. We know over 50 years that boron level is still going to be at an effective level to resist fungal decay. So there's a science behind the product. There's a science behind those marketing claims that we use. So I provided some standards in there, and I provided some independent reports as well through the ICCES, demonstrating that the products that we manufacture are qualified and manufactured to independent standards to make sure that they are suitable or fit for their intended use. So there's that as well. So I guess the final thing I'll say is we've been in this business over 20 years. Our claims are nearly zero over 20 years, 22 years, I think, going on 23. We're having a huge success with the product. Our customers are using the product. They're loyal to the product. They like the product. When you compare it against fiber cement's a good product. I would say, bias or not, we've got a better product. You've got fewer joints with our product. It gives you better shadow lines because it's a little bit thicker than their 5/16 product. On top of that, I'd argue that we're actually more durable. So with fiber cement, you do have to worry, efflorescence is one issue. If you got salts bleeding to the surface, that can cosmetically affect the quality of the appearance of the product. You can also run into freeze-thaw situations in climates like this where the product has a very high absorption rate, and it can delaminate that water if it's containing a high level of water, and then it freezes. So there are some vulnerabilities with fiber cement. On top of that, something that we've been testing over the last 10 years and really studying, and it's really impact resistance. So we've had a lot of customers come to us saying, we're looking for something that's more impact resistance. It might be a development on a golf course. It might be something where it's just a past hail event. So, we've tested against, Factory Mutual 4473, which is a test method. We've tested our product competitively against fiber cement, and we've been able to demonstrate consistently that we're far more superior in something that is actually relevant when it comes to durability, besides just rot resistance or termite resistance or those common durability things. But from an aesthetic standpoint, we can withstand significant impacts that are going to maintain the visual quality of the siding over time.
Okay, thank you very much. And actually, staff wouldn't mind coming up and talk a little bit about like what you looked at to make the recommendation in concerns to the materials.
President Schrader. So we kind of are trying to be consistent with how we look at other site plan reviews. So if we're considering this to be substantially similar to a fiber cement based product, it'd be limited to 30% on each elevation depending on the material because of the thickness of the product. So thicker fiber cement products are allowed to have more coverage over the entire building, whereas the thinner fiber cement products are subject to a maximum of 30% because of our concerns about durability, but also aesthetics. So looking at that combination, and then based on the material sample board that we were provided, we were not convinced that this would exceed or meet our durability expectations for a multiple family building. It's 3 stories and is right next to residential uses.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
All right, at this point, I'm going to now open the public hearing. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes, and that'll all be tracked on the timer by the clerk. Is there anyone here to speak? Anybody here to speak? All right, not seeing anybody. I am going to close the hearing and see if there's any comments or questions from my colleagues. Okay, I will jump in and just give a little background from Planning Commission just to say I do want to commend the developer for reaching out to the neighborhood. I think they've done a very excellent job of doing that. I think some points that they didn't highlight that I would like to, just the amount of kind of environmental remediation that they're looking at because this was a metal finishing area. The neighbors actually made comments that they didn't know it was that bad until they started seeing the pictures. So that's something to be commended. I also think the affordable housing was a big deal. I'm glad to see that the new condition won't be if I'm understanding right, won't be an issue with the developer, because I think that is an important part, especially because that's that, just to put it very frankly, when that part was being appealed, the Planning Commission looked at that affordability and adding that to make this development possible. So then to come back and appeal the affordable housing part of that and duration was going to be somewhat of an issue, but I'm glad to see that that's been worked out to kept that at 15 and 10. But the issue of the durability of the materials, like I am concerned about the cost, but I think that that's something, the Planning Commission had a big discussion about and how this will affect buildings throughout the whole city. So that said, I'm seeing if there's any other questions or comments from my colleagues. Council President Bittner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the spirit of just moving us along, I'll move to deny the appeal and stick with the staff recommendation. Other council members may feel strongly or differently, but I do, Mr. Chair, I think your comments about the additional costs related to other elements of the building are totally valid. I think one of the reasons we have building standards, though, is to make sure that we have consistency across the city and making sure that our buildings are durable and lasting. So that's a concern, and I think what led staff to their recommendation. So that's the motion I'll make. And it's done.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, recall that staff had noted that there may be some clarity that could be offered in at least one of the conditions of approval as well, if staff would like to elaborate on that.
Sure.
Thank you. For the deed restriction that's attached to the minimum lot area variance, staff would recommend that the wording be amended to add the following sentence: 20% of the units shall remain affordable at 50% of the area median income continuously for a period of not less than 15 years.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to move that amendment to condition 1, which is item 2.1, and perhaps Ms. Smith could forward that specific language to the clerk for the record.
Fantastic. Not seeing any other questions or comments. Councilmember Bender's motion is before us. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and that motion carries. As we've already dispensed with the consent agenda, the next item on the agenda is item number 5, relating to a rezoning application at 901 Winter Street Northeast. Council President Bender?
Mr. Chair, I wonder if we might change the order and take up item 6 first. Just, I know we have
see
members of the
people, yeah.
community here for that item.
I'd be happy to do that if that works for the rest of my committee. So I will move on to item 6 in the agenda, which is the application submitted by Councilmember Olson to add a commemorative street name for Richard Estes Way at Plymouth Avenue North, between Penn Avenue North and Queen Avenue North. And we'll begin with a brief staff presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you, council members. We have a street renaming for you today. Street renamings are typically either done as a full street renaming or commemorative. So in this case, we are commemorating the life of Richard Estes, who is the owner and operator of Estes Funeral Home, which has been located in North Minneapolis for many decades, at the formerly at the northeast corner of Penn and Plymouth. Northwest corner, and now it has just recently finished construction at the northwest corner to allow for the North Point Health and Wellness Center to expand hopefully later this year. And we had a request by Councilmember Ellison to do the commemorative street name to Richard Estes Way. After speaking with Mrs. Estes, the request today before you is to alter from Richard Estes Way to Richard Estes Avenue, and I believe she's here to speak as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Estes, Mrs. Estes, will you be interested in speaking? No pressure. We appreciate you coming down.
Just a little bit.
Great.
I'm April Estes, and I live at 1606 Xerxes Avenue North in Minneapolis, and I am now the owner of Estes Funeral Chapel, the only African-American funeral chapel in Minneapolis, which we've been in North Minneapolis for 62 years. And my husband, who passed away 6 years ago, was the founder of Estes Funeral Chapel. I can't say I was the founder because I'm a retired nurse with Hennepin County, and I never did visit the funeral chapel, but I want to keep his legacy going. He deserves it. He has helped people all over Hennepin County. So we're asking that you approve a section there in North Minneapolis as Richard Estes Avenue. He'll never be forgotten, but we still want to just keep him. And if you ever in North Minneapolis, you should come over and visit the new chapel. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Estes. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, seeing no more discussion, I'll defer to Councilmember Ellison to put a motion before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, April, for being here today and for continuing your husband's legacy and for running Estes Funeral Home. It's a huge asset to have over in North Minneapolis. Right before my motion, I'll just say a few words. I didn't have the fortune of knowing or having personal encounters with Richard Estes, but I know of Estes Way because I was born and raised in North Minneapolis, and there are countless stories from community members, from constituents, from people that I have known of not only the excellent service that the Estes provided for the North Side, but also the amount of care that Richard Estes brought to the North Side when people were going through hard times, could not afford, if you could imagine in your toughest time, you're getting ready to bury a family member or a loved one, and you can't afford it. And Richard was always willing to step up and work with families. And so I will make the motion on behalf of April to change to approve the land use application and add the commemorative street name of Richard Estes Avenue as opposed to way to Plymouth Avenue North between Penn Avenue North and Queen Avenue. And thank my colleagues. So.
Thank you. Not seeing any other questions or comments. Councilmember Ellison's motion is before us. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. Thank you so much for being here today. We're now going to go back to number 5, and so we've already dispensed with part of it in the consent agenda, and so this will be the rezoning application at 901 Winter Street Northeast. This application was part of the same deal from our previous item, and so I'll move the approval of this application. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. The second part is also the same project, and could staff give the committee, if staff's around? You can tell me if I messed up, too.
Committee members, I think staff just assumed that we covered the covered the item sufficiently, that, and number 5 is a rezoning request, and the rezoning does facilitate the project happening. So it has 2 parts, simply because it's also a passage of an ordinance technically. So that's the action.
That makes sense. Well, I will move that action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. Seeing no further business before us, we are adjourned.